All right, good morning. Good morning, good morning. I am very, very excited about this Offsite Construction Series brought to you by Offsite Dirt, our new media platform for construction news in all various forms. My name is Audrey Grabesic. I am the owner of Modular SureSite, and I am also the contributor to Offsite Dirt. I'm very excited about this series today for Offsite construction architects making an impact. So thank you for being here. Our first architect is Nick Gomez, and Nick is with Lowney Architect Group. He is the studio director of multifamily housing at Lowney Architect. With over 20 years of experience in affordable and multi-housing, Nick has an extensive background utilizing offsite on his projects. He has worked on a variety of urban infill sites with both nonprofit and for-profit developers, and his projects have received awards at the local level, state and national levels. In his capacity as a modular expert, Nick has successfully permitted over 5,000 units of factory-built housing and has partnered with factories in California, Idaho, Germany, and China. It's very exciting. Thank you for being here, Nick. Our next architect is Will Henschel. He is the principal at 359 Design. He is a local, as I call local, because I'm here in Denver, Colorado, and he is as well. Their design is a collaboration of individuals focusing on pushing the boundaries of what is possible by creating community, building partners, and crafting meaningful design solutions. Having recently executed 100 of system-built units on single-family, multifamily, residential, and hospitality developments throughout the Western United States. 359 Design is an expert in capturing the inherent efficiencies of off-site construction, pricing, manufacturer process, design, intent, scheduling, and nearly all other aspects of project delivery can harness this efficiency and bring to life projects previously assumed impossible. Thank you for being here, Will.
Yes.
Isaac Astrakhan. He is the principal at Stephen B. Jacob Group. He has been with the SBG Group since 1998, but this group has over 50 years of experience, which is phenomenal. When he started as a project manager for Hotel Giraffe, since then, he has worked on many different hospitality and residential products, including 325 Fifth Avenue, Edge in Williamsburg, 200 Lafayette Street, and Gansevoort Park Avenue Hotel. He has recently completed ALTA LIC, a 43-story residential tower in Long Island City, and Citizen M, New York Boundary Hotel, the tallest modular hotel in the world. Thank you, Isaac, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And Salvatore Verestro. I'm sorry, Sal. I know I was going to try to get that off, and I just
okay,
did.
no problem.
You're so sweet. He is the president at Spillman Farmer Architects. He's located in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and has been with the firm since 1983. Sal graduated from Kansas State University in 1981, in addition to being a registered architect, a certified construction specifier, and a certified construction contract administrator. He is a past adjunct facility member in the Department of Environmental Engineering at Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania. He is a fellow of the Construction Specification Institute and the past chair for AIA's Master Spec Architectural Review Committee. Sal is currently a member of the AIA Contract Document Committee, and we are very excited to have all of you here. Thank you, Sal, for being here as well.
Glad to be here.
So first, I'm going to have Nick take it away. Nick, give us a little bit more, maybe involved in your background with Lowney Architect.
Yeah, so Lowney Architecture started doing modular probably about 10 years ago. Started working with data communities. I moved over to Launi about 7 years ago after doing 15 years of multifamily in the Bay Area. At the time I started, Launi was probably about 20% housing, 70% mixed use commercial projects. We've since flipped that due to the housing demand here in the Bay Area, both for affordable and supportive and hospitality. So we're probably right now we have like about 70% multifamily and affordable housing is our stock, and then 30% is retail and mixed use. And we've really seen the growth in demand because of the need for housing. But I think we have developers and both affordable and market rate that are just really trying to figure out how they could bring product to market faster, and modular has been one of those ways. It looks like I'm talking about one of our projects here. So 2711 Shattuck. This is a tiny little 24 unit project in Berkeley, California. Next. The reason why it's interesting, it actually was built in China. It's not shipping containers, but it used shipping container technology. It's very small footprint. The owner, Patrick Kennedy from Panoramic Interest, he's always trying to push the boundaries. So he was looking at, they have these standard unit plans that they do, much like hospitality, but this ended up being a student housing project. You go to the next slide. We worked with a factory CIMC out of China. They use steel technology, container technology, but they're not containers. They're taller, wider. We still, for shipping, we had to maintain the ISO lengths. So we didn't do double loaded corridors. They meet, one mod had the corridor and the other mod was just the unit. And next. And even the stair on the right side was built in the factory with temp structure and shipped. So it's all stainless steel railing. It had temp ceilings. They shipped it. And if you see right above the gate, this 2711, there was the temp structure right there for the mod below and the mod above. We decided to leave that element in there just as a reminder that that piece was modular, because we could say that that was a modular component, but people would never believe it. We cladded in Parklex. I know Isaac has the record for the high rise. I got, this is my low rise here in California using steel technology. One of the nice things about working with a factory overseas is most of the products come from overseas. So we were able to really take our finishes up a notch without much cost impact. And everything you see, the Murphy bed was part of something the owner wanted. They fabricated it for us in China. So they really did a lot of extra things working with the factory overseas. But some of the difficult things were making sure we maintained our green building compliance and sort of finding ways to comply with the code here. Not that the products didn't comply with the code, but they measure things overseas differently than we do here. So, just working with our consultants to make sure that everything in this project was in compliance.
Thank you, Nick. Isaac, you're up.
I'm up. So yes, I'm a principal at the Stephen Jacobs Group. Andy Pepper, interior design as well. Stephen and Andy are husband and wife team. Stephen has been in business for over 50 years, and we have a quite diverse office as far as the types of projects. That's how I guess you stay in business for over 50 years. But the bulk of the practice is multifamily, residential, and hospitality. A few years back, we had the privilege, the opportunity to work as architects of record on the Citizen M Bowery Hotel on the Lower East Side here in New York City. And it's Citizen M is a Dutch hotel brand. They designed their rooms as modules. So most of their hotels around the world are modular. And at the time, it was or is still the world's tallest modular hotel, 19 stories, 15 floors of modular sandwiched in between concrete structure on the lower floors and a steel structure above. 300 rooms. The modules came over from Poland, were built by Polcom. So imagine an entire hotel crossing the Atlantic on a ship, but all went well. It arrived safely, and the hotel is now in operations. Interior design is all done by a firm based in Amsterdam called Concrete. Citizen M does all their work with concrete. So here you see the typical guest room, about 8 foot wide. Next. And massive amenity spaces, communal spaces that make up for the quite small rooms. Look forward to speaking more about modular with the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Isaac. Salvador, Sal, you're up.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are, I guess. Thanks for being here. I'm with Spillman Farmer Architects. I'm the current president. We're in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, about a 20-person firm. We mainly do college and university work, and that's how we got introduced to modular construction. Although we knew a lot about it and had investigated it, one of our clients came to us and said they don't have time, the college client, don't have time to have disturbance on their campus for very long, and we introduced modular to them, and before we knew it, we were doing our first modular residence hall or dormitory to some people. And the students left in May, and they came back in August, and there was a building. That was for Muhlenberg College in Pennsylvania. This project that you see on the screen is in Long Island from Molloy College, which was just completed 18 months ago. Same situation. They did not want to have the campus disturbed. What you're seeing here, by the way, the fabricator was in Pennsylvania, not too far from us, which is about probably a 3, well, depending on traffic, in New York, 2 to 3 hour travel time. And they shipped, I think there were 40 plus boxes for this large residence hall. And that was what it looked like when the modulars were just set in place. And then I think the next slide is the finished product. It does not look like a modular construction. They were incredibly happy. It was on budget, on time, more or less. Students came back and they had dedication, and they moved right in the fall of last year. So that's how we got introduced to it. I'm excited about talking to you more about modulars. This is a great opportunity, and thanks to everyone for having me.
And Will, please entertain
Thank you,
us.
Audrey. Thank you. Hi, Will Henschel, 359 Design, and I'm glad to be here with you today, and certainly humbled with the company that I'm in, and also see a fair amount of familiar, at least names and faces online and those participating. So we're a multifamily living environment studio. We're based out of Denver. The bulk of our work is within resort and winter resort environment. So most of you, as you know, a great environment for us to harvest a systems built approach due to construction costs, due to short construction seasons, and what have you. We got into the world of modular construction and had first designed a project that is in the upper corner, Burlingame. We had designed that under modular construction, and at the time it went straightforward stick frame, and that was about 12 years ago. That was with Oz Architecture at the time when I was a principal there. We've since taken that project, and we're now on the last phase of it, and we've taken that modular design, and now the time is right, and we're bringing that project to the city of Aspen for affordable housing as a solution to some of their housing needs there. So very happy that we have that. The project next in line there is Chamonix, and that was really our, as far as implementation, our gateway into modular construction. We did that project with Nashua and John Moon, who I know is online here, and we're very proud of that. That was a project that the town of Vail had been stumbling to get the work done, get that project done, and we really backed into a budget, into a timeline, and Nashua really went up and out of their way to make that project happen on time, on budget, and really set the precedent for us within resort communities. So we continue to roll that. We continue to take that through multiple communities, Montana, California, Idaho, state of Colorado, California, and beyond. So look forward to accelerating that even further. And as we push the boundaries and some of the things we'll be talking about for the rest of our time. So thanks again, and look forward to continuing to chat. So.
You will. Appreciate that. So here we are. We have selected 5 questions for our panels, and we're going to go through each one of the questions. At the end of the question, please ask any burning questions that you have or answers that you are looking for at the very end, after all 4 of our architects have answered the question. So our first question is, how does your design process shift when you do offsite versus onsite construction? And our first person up is Nick.
So, since modular construction has design parameters for the boxes we're using, sorry, we do think of it differently, especially as we start to lay out a building. We're thinking of the big moves right away. In site build construction, we're almost developing the plans, and we know we can kind of come back and skin that building and engineer it. You could go to the next slide. But with modular construction, we have maximum heights, maximum lengths, so that we have to adhere to. So we have to kind of think right away how these components are starting to make buildings. Next slide. And so as we're doing that, we're sort of planning our big moves right away, looking at how we're going to achieve that articulation with the minimum square foot units we're trying to get to. And at the same time, it's a very collaborative process, I would say, when we're doing offsite construction versus just strictly site built. Because if we're doing something different, I want to check in with my engineers right away. Like, how do you see this detail working out? And I get input from my engineer, and I also want to talk to the factory sometimes about, is this plan going to, is this the most efficient layout? Because in the end, we want to make sure we're getting this project built. So there's a lot of collaboration up front that we do when we're designing projects for offsite versus just strictly site built.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Isaac, I'm going to have you answer that same question. How does your design process shift when you do offsite versus onsite construction?
Well, I think, by definition, you have these maximum dimensions. You're designing within a box. So I think for some architects, we've been taught that we can design whatever we want, to be super creative and do all that. I think in modular construction, you can do that, but you have to understand the limits of the system. And you can try to push the boundaries as much as possible. But at the end of the day, you're dealing with a box, and you're using that box because you want to be as efficient as possible. So it's a balance to find, how do you design something that you're happy with, but that also is efficient and fulfills the premise of using modular in the first place. And I think some projects, I won't mention by name, but one big one that was built in Brooklyn went through many difficulties because the use of modular was the right way to go, except that the design was more complicated than it needed to be. So it had those challenges. So I think you just have to understand the system and work within those boundaries.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Isaac. Will?
Yeah. So thanks, and I think that's a good good pieces within there. What we'd like to talk a bit about is certainly design lock, and and going through and design lock process and what have you happens much earlier within offsite construction. We like to fix it. Well, we like to, if there is a, discussion, is it going to go stick or modular? And that's, oftentimes with new developers, new municipalities, that question that they have to answer, right? We prove that at schematic design. We design heavily at schematic design so that we can get a solid price and that we can get the plants in, getting their bids, and getting to letter of intent at the end of schematic design. At 50% DD, we go to design lock within there, such that everyone can start doing their work. So obviously there aren't those changes and those large scale changes that we can do well down the road. So it's a benefit, I feel, for all of us, but something in a certain lane that you need to push inexperienced developers, inexperienced builders, and experienced public to understand as we go down the road with that. So thanks.
Thank you, Will. And Sal, how have you seen your design process shift?
Thanks. And by the way, well said, Will. They did a nice job there. I agree with everyone 100%. So the only things I can add to the conversation is that in a nutshell, our design process doesn't really change very much if you make the decision to go to modular or not up front. Not many things do change. Just like any other project, we have to understand that it's modular, it's a project delivery method, and we have to understand the program. As my counterparts mentioned, the size is the big dictator. So you work around that. That's the program pretty much, as far as what, except for the owner's space programming. It's similar to when we were in school and a professor would give you a site or a space and say, here, fit all this stuff into it. It's not much different than that. The only challenges we have, I think, or that's a little different, is that the design process of incorporating MEP into these tight spaces is a challenge. So working with the MEP people happens upfront, faster and quicker, and initially in the design than it does, I think, under traditional on-site construction, and that includes a structural engineer who's generally provided by the fabricator. But the most important thing I want to add to this conversation is that as designers, we have to think about this building being moved to the site and it could be 5 miles and it could be 500 miles. But you have to think about this box that we're moving that's left exposed to the elements and the wind, and you have to design for that. You have to protect that building as it's being moved, which doesn't normally happen on on-site construction. So it has to be watertight. And at Windproof, the recent project we did traveled pretty fast. Obviously on the highway, you're going 55 miles an hour, you get a headwind of 30 miles an hour, and all of a sudden you got 80, 90 miles of winds on your envelope, which isn't finished yet. And things can get damaged. So you have to plan on that. Plus it has to be watertight at that point. You don't want all those finishes that are complete. So that's the only thing, in my mind, that's the biggest design change. But other than that, pretty much the same.
I agree. I think that's a very, very good point. Travel of boxes is definitely a huge impact into the building envelope. So thank you for bringing that up. Our next question is, how does permitting and regulatory code process change in offsite versus, in onsite versus offsite construction?
So thanks, and I'll cue it up, first, and this is, this is our illustrative timeline as far as it goes. One of the first challenges that we had, and again, I think there are people online that can remember when this happened, was within a project that we did with the town of Vail, and getting it done. And it was the project is immediately adjacent to the Vail Fire Station. And, Vail in its aging buildings, and, buildings that are created and over time, a lot of buildings there have questionable fire and code compliance within them, and kind of push it along. So the fire department plays a very, very active and very, very broad role within everything. When we were doing this project Chamonix for the town of Vail delivered project, The thought that Vale Fire really did not have a whole lot of jurisdiction over the boxes and over the particular pieces that went within the boxes was something that was incredibly hard for them to grasp. It didn't stop them from visiting the plant, and Nashua was great about letting it happen. But I think that goes to the education, and it goes to the education across the board. Once we got past that hurdle, and now as we go through resort communities, we do have those fire chiefs that can talk to one another as they go along. And it's also a fair amount of education that we have within any new community that we go into, just to lay out early on what the process is going to be, that we're going to be permitting through the state, and these are the pieces, this is where your jurisdiction is. It doesn't often stop them from wanting to comment, but it comes along, and it's all part of the education. So thank you.
And Nick?
Yeah, similar, Will. Good points. In California, because and I think many states, because the offsite construction is approved by a third-party regulatory review agency, both in the permitting and in the quality assurance that happens in the factory, it's explaining that up front to the municipality we're working with. And some municipalities, because in California we have our state code, obviously, and the projects that are reviewed by the third party, adhere to the state code. Many municipalities have local amendments to codes. So that's where I think some of the heartburn comes, is they feel like, oh, your project's not complying with our local codes. And we try to be good about that, and especially if we're doing affordable housing or supportive housing, things that are receiving local funding. We've talked to NTA, which is one of the third parties we use a lot, and they said just list those codes that you want to comply with that are some of the local amendments, and we'll make sure that we review the project for that. And one of the other things that I think is critical too is a lot of times we have green building compliance. So it's just making sure that those go beyond, which is our California Green Building Code sometimes. So we got to make sure that we're communicating that to the state and being very clear in our documents. As you see here, there's a process for that state permit and there's a process for the local permit. And those are separate documents that clearly delineate that scope. And we want to be very clear about that scope, because we don't want any confusion from the local municipality that they think they have jurisdiction over something, as Will had mentioned earlier. Be very clear about it. The documents that get stamped have their scope, and educate everyone, and you don't have any confusion.
Thank you. That's so great. I appreciate that. Sal, can you give us a little bit of insight?
Yeah,
Since
I can
you
add to
are
this.
on the AIA.
Yeah. Well, I can't comment too much on that, but I know the AA is looking at providing documents, by the way, to help us do our job better. Great points by my two counterparts. Obviously, the project, like any project, the AHJ on the landing site is the authority having jurisdiction, no matter which way you look at it. So we have to do a lot of coordination, as Will said up front. He said education 3 times. I counted it, and he's absolutely right. We have to educate the people on what we're doing. Let them know. They don't like surprises any more than we do. So the best thing to do is contact them and say, "What do you want?" And Nick emphasized that you've got to just explain to them what you're doing, and work the best way. And when we did Malloy in New York, boxes were built in PA. The AHJ came down to the project site, made several visits to the fabricator site to look at things just like you normally would on an on-site construction. And we coordinated that with them to have that done. And it went really well, to be honest with you. There was a couple little quirks, but nothing. I think that's a big challenge. And lastly, I want to get back to travel. There's regulatory requirements on moving boxes across state lines. And if you, and I know we have somebody in New York City here, but Isaac's in New York City, but crossing the Verrazano Bridge with a box that's 40 feet long, you just don't do that in the middle of the day. So regulatory requirements, we had to get permits from them, and we could only bring them across the bridge at night, 2 in the morning, and so many at a time. So that was a hurdle to cross, but it was working with them. You just don't pick up and go. So those things have to be their challenges, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, and Isaac, I would love to hear your opinion, especially since you do a lot of infill with hospitality. So how does that work for you?
Well, I think our experience with the Citizen M Bowery was we actually designed that building originally as a conventional build, and we got it approved at the building department like we would any other job, you know, zoning review, code, everything. And then at some point we worked in parallel the conventional and the modular scheme, and then at some point the ownership decided to flip to modular. And we were actually quite surprised how easy that was to get approved. And I think that New York City in particular is, you know, especially with our issues with the lack of affordable housing, is very tuned to modular construction. And for them, as far as, you know, we obviously, we didn't change the zoning, we didn't change our egress, we didn't change the envelope and the bulk of the building. So for them, they were looking at two buildings that were pretty much, you know, the same, except one was conventional and one was modular. And we got it approved, the modular scheme, in a record time. So that was, you know, that was great. Transportation is always an issue. But again, it's you know, educating and communicating, and that also wasn't a deal breaker in any way, and it was pretty smooth. And these modules were coming from Poland, so they all had a passport. They were all inspected by a third party in Poland. They arrived at the port here in Red Hook, and you know, off they went. So relatively straightforward.
I think it's amazing that you were able to do that and to know all those pieces. Did you rely heavily on the factories to find out those specific things, the transportation department or the building department, when you guys were moving those boxes?
All the moving of the boxes was all on the manufacturer's team here based in New York. So they dealt with all of that, and they dealt with it well, because it, you know, it didn't slow anything down.
It's amazing. Good for you guys. That's a, right there is like success.
It worked out.
Thank you, Isaac. I appreciate it. Are factories easy to work with on design, and what are the challenges? Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, so I'm going to say yes and no. This project is kind of an example of that. I'm going to be presenting on this at the World of Modular in a couple of weeks. It's about breaking all the rules in design for modular. As you see, this project has some horizontal articulation going on that doesn't stack. So that's kind of like something that is not normal for modular. And then on the lower right-hand corner of that orange box is a two-story portal with a mod floating on the steel structure. So this design came about because if you see there's a rail line that's kind of on the right side, we were trying to articulate the building horizontally instead of vertically to respond to that. And even though this was modular, we thought these small articulations would be an interesting design component. The owner liked it. We presented it to Factory A. They told me, absolutely not. You cannot build this project modular. It doesn't work. You know, and I was like, well, why? You know, and they're like, gave me reasons, things don't stack. Structurally, you can't do it. So I called my structural engineer. Can we do this project? He's like, well, we haven't sort of done anything like this before. Let me think about it. He came back to me. He's like, yeah, we could engineer this. It will require some hold downs pulled back, some site work where they track through the bay to project out. And I went back to the factory, and really what that factory was wanting to do is, they need to be efficient building in their factory. This is Factory A. They weren't really concerned about doing something interesting. So we went to another factory, and that factory said, yeah, we could absolutely do this project and we'll work with you. We had to simplify the design a little bit, but it really depends on the factory and the team you put together. And I think, if you're working together early on to achieve a goal, I think you can come up with something, interesting and different, but it really involves collaboration. And collaboration.
Well, and I love that you weren't going to back down, right, Nick? Because I think that's the bigger piece, right? You've got to keep looking for that great collaborative partner, like you were saying, and it is a uniqueness that a lot of factories maybe aren't looking because their production lines and they're fulfilled from month to month to year end, and so it's nice to see that you were able to approach and find that. Did it take you quite some time to find that factory, or was it like, yeah, we're just going to talk to our other partner?
So we kind of lucked out. There was another factory we had in mind that we knew would be open. but it turned out this particular developer started their own factory. So
Wow,
self-performed.
that was nice. For you.
Dodged the bullet on
It's
that
beautiful.
one.
It's beautiful. And congratulations for making a building look like that. So awesome. So I'm going to take this question. I'm going to take it over to Sal. I'm going to have you answer this one.
Okay. Well, my experience, our experience here at the firm has been great. I think that we've had very little, I know we've had very little conflicts and difficulties. We've worked with several different fabricators. And you have to understand there's a fabricator and there's a contractor in the field, but just like any contractor, the fabricators, you're going to have differences of opinion sometimes, but they are taking a bulk of some of the responsibility. So you have to be a little bit forgiving with them. And I think if you set the parameters early with the fabricator that you're the designer and you have certain parameters that you like to achieve and make it well known, I think it goes a lot smoother. Obviously, they want to do things the most efficiently as they can, just like a contractor in the field, and sometimes take the easy way out just because it's easier, but doesn't do much for our designs. So you're going to have personality conflicts in some cases and a difference of opinion, just like you do in traditional construction. But I think for the most part, I've had some really good experiences, and maybe that's not the case with my counterparts here. But the best way to avoid is to have a frank conversation up front. And I say this in all respect, everybody, you got to check your egos at the door. And I'm talking about the fabricators. They have to check their egos. And our architects, we have egos and we have to do the same thing, but fabricators have to do that. We're educated people, and you've seen some of the designs that these people in this program are putting out. They're fantastic, to say the least, and it can be done. And I'm always concerned when people think that this is just a commodity, and it's certainly not that in any way, shape, or form. The biggest challenge, believe it or not, I see with fabricators is they don't get along with the site contractor. Not so much with us as architects and designers. They're battling back and forth with the site contractor and who's doing what and who's doing, how are we going to coordinate these things? So that's the biggest challenge that we've seen. But other than that, it's been pretty good for us. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think sometimes it's more or less like you were saying, communication. Communication seems to be the big key in pre-planning and doing this. Isaac, what's your feeling about it? What have been your challenges, and have factories been easy for you to work with?
Yes, I think, like Sal was saying, the biggest challenge is when you have a project that has conventional components to it and modular, and when those two worlds meet. Those were every time were the biggest challenges we had on our project. So how do you limit that? The best way is for all of it to be under one umbrella. So you minimize the finger pointing. Because when you have a concrete shear wall that's going up 19 stories and it's not perfectly straight, and you have modules that are supposed to be stacked around it, then you quickly have problems. So yeah, other than that, I think having dealt with Polcom in Poland, maybe things get lost sometimes, maybe in translation. So you try to minimize that loss. I'll just tell you a quick anecdote. The first module that was placed for the Citizen M had to go between a concrete shear wall and the neighbor. It was on the fourth floor. So tight squeeze. The thing's 60 feet long. It's actually a room, a corridor, and a stair. And so below that is conventional build. So this is the first module. So we're there looking at it. They get it, they put it in place, few inches clearance between the two, but something's off in the back. There's something off. So we quickly realized that the conventional stair is going one way and the modular stair is going the other way. So how did that happen? In our world of problem solving, stuff happens, and then it all depends on how you deal with it. So we had the rest of the modules that were supposed to stack on top of that for that stair. They were all at the port of Red Hook, so we weren't shipping those back. So we decided we had to switch the stair in the conventional build, which is a couple floors below. So anyway, so like in any project, things happen. In modular, when they do happen, there's in a way more that's been built already because the module comes pretty much finished. So, just something to keep in mind.
I love the solution. It's always about solutions. That's so awesome. And
Problem
Will,
solving all day.
exactly. Well, what have been your challenges and factories that have been easy to work with your designs because they're very creative as well? This whole team, it's amazing to have you here. We have coast to coast team here. It's great.
Well, thanks, Audrey. And, certainly building on what Isaac said, and it's something that, we're telling our team all the time is, and something that I'd say quite often is good players adjust. And the reason that you're a good player is that what can adjust, what can't adjust, and you need to visualize those solutions as they come along. So we know that the box, as it's coming to the site and it's coming in there, that piece really isn't going to be changing, right? Because the logistics of changing that piece, getting it re-inspected, all of those things, that's a nightmare, right? So where do you look from there and just know what you have on the field? I think we love plants. We love the manufacturers. Obviously, they're in what we do. We have to have a great relationship with them, and anything that we come upon, we think that we can solve it. One of the challenges that we have up front is, so often, as I mentioned early on, is at schematic design, at the end of schematic design, going out and soliciting the manufacturers and really making a decision from there, getting a price that doesn't move. There's only so much that we can do within the design. So it's developing all of our pieces up front, really having those set of standards, that set of guidelines, so that as we go down the road, it's if we come to a place, well, we didn't have the exterior insulation, and how do we mitigate those those concerns of loosely documentation within early sets of drawings. So it really requires us and requires learning process along to have a fair amount of the design resolved earlier on. Our schematic design documents that we go from pricing are really a 30% design development because we really need to figure out some of those pieces. So mitigating the concerns and the finger pointing. So.
Good idea. Thank you for that. What new trends are you studying in offsite construction? Will, take it away.
Looks like I'm up again. So
you are.
So two pieces, and I'll use this slide to talk to one. Something that we've been working on over the past year, 2 years, is as I mentioned, we work within a fair amount of resort communities. Within those resort communities, there is typically one large employer that is responsible for a fair amount of workforce housing. And if you go into a resort community, the question is workforce housing. You're building this, but not a place for your workers. Our workers need great places to live. Our workers have families. So what does that look like? So one size doesn't fit all. Something that we've done over the past 2 years is with 3 different mountain employers, mountain companies, is come upon and work for them through the different types of their workers, the different types of units that each one of those workers would do, then how those units can then go into buildings and to various sites. So really developing with them a kit of parts as it goes along, and each one is different, each piece is different. But what we like to do is then take these modules, take these pieces, know what the price is going to be from plant to plant, so that as they move, and some of these operators have mountains in Colorado, they have them in California, they have them in Idaho, they have them in Montana, they have them in all of those places. So how can it be universal, and how can it go from there? So that's the first trend. And then not to fully take the microphone, but the second trend, a little bit counter to some of the dialogue, is On smaller projects, I would call it anything under 80 units in there. We are finding that a fair amount of our regional developers are looking to do these absent of solid general contractor model. So it's going on a CM side. That's to cut out the overhead profit general conditions that come along with it. So it's really boiling down those pieces, making it a little bit more simplified and clearly taking those lines of those delineations. We have some great partners here, a couple modular facilitators that take it through and say this is the process. Certainly not a one size fits all, and there's always a need for general contractor, but some of them are cutting out that typical general contractor role within it. So thanks.
Thank you, Will. Nick, how do you feel about this?
Some of the things we've been seeing are alternative materials, everything from, like CLT, mass timber to 3D printing. There's a lot of people trying to do things differently. If you went to a job site, 100 years ago, and then you go to a job site today, everything's kind of the same way, right? Studs, stud packs, so the only advancement is the guy, putting it together has a nail gun versus a hammer, right? So, we have a lot of people out here trying to look at, alternate materials, and then standardization is a big thing. Our clients have we have several clients who have their specific floor plans that we've developed with them, and these are the only things they use on all their projects. Obviously that's not super efficient for urban infill, because, you might take a few inches out of, units and you can squeeze another studio in. But, starting off with that basic floor plan and then seeing how you can, optimize that for the site and where you might need to make some adjustments. But it's not just our market rate developers. Our affordable and supportive housing developers also, they have standards that go into their manuals, and those manuals sort of dictate how they like their units laid out. So I think they're getting smart too, and they kind of want to skip that unit design phase and kind of just go straight into the building design phase.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Sal, what are your trends that you're seeing?
Well, just a couple I can add to this is, first of all, I thought Isaac hit the nail on the head before when he talked about the lack of affordable housing. It's not just in New York City, it's across the country. So as far as a trend, we've been seeing more and more of that. I think it doesn't take a brain surgeon to read the news and follow along that's going to be a huge trend in the next couple of years, if not already. So I think you'll see more of that, and we're investigating that very closely. And Will also mentioned about workforce housing. We've also had clients come to us locally and say we need some additional housing, and we brought modular to their attention, and it was well received. So I think that's going to be a huge trend. We also have seen our college clients come to us with small single individual modular units. I call them campus kiosks. I say that jokingly, but they just want a food establishment dropped in the middle of a campus. We did one, it was a barbecue station, and we're going to be doing some other ones. But so we're seeing a trend there because it's quick, and they know what they're going to getting and all the benefits of modulars. So yeah, that's what we're seeing from our end.
Isaac, what are you seeing as trends in the hospitality multi-family area?
No, these guys have said it all. No, I think what I'm interested in is how to make these modules more and more efficient, especially from an energy perspective. And I don't know, but it's something that I'm interested in. As far as we can, there's this comparison somewhat about with modules and modular construction with the automobile industry, right? So it's becoming a manufactured process. So then we're here now. How do we now make it into make these modules into the next, like Tesla, for instance? So I think technology is going to have a big part in all of this.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And I think the other area that's really expanding very quickly is the ADU space for higher density in some other urban air infills. So I'm seeing that as a trend as well. Thank you, Isaac. I appreciate that. And our last and final question is, what advice would you give to firms interested in doing an offsite constructed project? I'm going to go with Isaac first.
I mean, modular is just, it's another tool for certain types of projects, and it's a no-brainer for a lot of projects. So and like has been said before, we're in the problem-solving, business. So for any firm, the process is not that much different. It's just has its certain constraints that you need to embrace and push the envelope as you do so. But it's also not, brain surgery. So I would encourage, everyone to get on board if it makes sense for the particular project that you're working on. I think for us, I see with New York City developers, even when the project makes sense to go modular for them somehow because they haven't done it before, there's this reticence of doing it because no one wants to be first. But the more modular projects are done, the less first there will be.
Agreed. And that's why we have you guys all here today. Sal, why don't you tell us what kind of advice you would offer?
Sure, glad to. First of all, I think the best advice, the optimum advice is if you're going to get into this, make the decision with your client early on that you want to do this. Although some people mentioned here today that they could shift it in midstream. That's not the optimum way, but certainly it can be done because they're experienced at this. And I think you have to understand that the difference is the process. The construction process in modular moves very quickly, and as architects, we have to move quickly. So there's a tremendous amount of time that's condensed during construction that we have to react to that fabricator. So it's very intense, and it's not for the faint of heart. You be working many hours for a short period of time. But I want to stress that more importantly, some people think modular isn't challenging as far as design and construction. If you get anything out of this presentation, look at Isaac, Nick's, and Will's work. It's phenomenal. The design is just fantastic. And from what I saw, I'm just totally impressed. So don't think that you don't have design freedom. You certainly do. And that's one of the things that really bothers me when people say, I don't want to do modular because there's no design. It's the furthest thing from the truth. And I think that that's one thing you got to get away from. But the other thing is, then lastly, and I'll end here, I don't think anybody should go into this and recommend it to a client just because they're saving money. They might not, depending on things that evolve. That's not the only reason to use modular. There's many facets of this modular construction that's a benefit to the client, considering one being is the timetable when you consider that. So, but there's a lot of advantages. Don't just do it because of time savings or money savings, but there's a lot of facets. So I'll end there.
Thank you. Isaac, we got from you, we've got Sal. Let's go with Nick.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so I totally agree with Sal. I'd like to reinforce that. And I'd like to even take it a step further. Don't, if it's your first project, don't expect to save money. And, I would say don't go into it as a first project. To go into it as learning to do more projects modular. You want to get that education on that first project. And so my key points, again, I kind of hit all these earlier. You really have to educate yourself as much as possible. So go visit a factory. Talk to contractors that have executed projects before you start it. Look at some projects that have utilized it. Early, you got to know that you got to consult your factory and design and your engineers early on in the design process. And, my favorite point is collaboration. You really have to work with the full team on this. And it's not just the factory and the engineers. You actually have to talk to the site contractor because a lot of times they're executing the details. So it's a real holistic process when you're doing these projects. And, you want to make sure that you're not holding up that site contractor with a detail that is very difficult for them to execute, but it was easy for the factory to produce. So it's making sure that you get input across the board. And, if it's your first project, don't do a Mayfair, keep it simple, flat as possible. You want to learn. So that first project, keep it simple. And my favorite point, don't ever force it. If you're forcing modular to work on a project, it's probably not the right one. Just, walk away. There's going to be another project down the road, because if you really force it, you're probably setting yourself up for failure.
Thank you, Nick. And Will, we're going to have you close.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and appreciate Sal, the kind words, and also with Isaac and Nick on this panel. I think it's been great. So thank you for that. I think in building on that, and it's mostly been said, is we, like I said, we commit, right? And we know the signs that are telling us not to do it, right? And you have to watch for those signs. But we know that the developers that don't go and don't do it as modular construction never really wanted to do it, from the beginning. They were always, for the most part, they were always being told by others, it doesn't work, and they, kind of went into it with a doubt. So give your partners tools to commit, have the education, to commit. And, for us, it's design, know those telltale signs, but keep running down the road until your road is taken out, from underneath you, but know when your road is coming out from underneath you as well. So thanks.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you all so much. And did anybody have any final questions from our audience? Please just unmute yourself and feel free to ask. Well, I guess you guys did such an amazing job that you answered all the questions. So thank you, Nick Gomez from Lowney Architecture, Isaac, Daniel Astrakhan from Stephen B. Jacob Group, Sal Verastro from Spillman Farmer Architects, and Will Henschel, principal at 359 Design. I cannot thank you enough. This has been phenomenal. I love seeing you guys grow in this community and educating people in the industry on how modular can be possible. It makes me excited because I think we need more of this for our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just a couple of notes, we have an amazing partner that we have brought on for Offsite Dirt, which is advancing prefabrication. Our partner is putting together a new event in biopharma facilities, March 30th through April 1st as a virtual event. If you haven't been to an advancing prefabrication event, I would strongly recommend you getting on their website. This was kind of a game changer for me last year in Dallas. So please join us if you are available, because things are changing in the pharmaceutical industry. And then last but not least, our next Tuesday, March 30th at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Where is your money going on your projects? We are featuring Michelle Boyer, who is a financial planner, tax planner for Offsite, and I think it could be very valuable for you. Again, thank you very much for all. We appreciate your time today and contribution. We are certainly very, very pleased that you've been here with us for the last hour, and thanks all to the guests of this amazing group. You men are outstanding. Keep up the hard work, and I look forward to catching up on your next project. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Have a
Bye,
great
guys.
day.
Have a great day.
Bye.